Thank you so much, Natasha. That was so insightful and perfectly sets the stage for today's panel discussions. Session one presents a case study on a new generation of Ghanaian figurative painters. Accra, Ghana is rapidly becoming one of Africa's major art hubs. The capital city of Ghana has birthed art stars for decades. Most recently, Amoako Boafo and our guest panelist, Anan Afote. Today, many of Ghana's emerging artists are working in a distinctly figurative style. This panel will examine where Ghana's figurative painters are studying and how they are influencing the future of the genre. The session moderator is my colleague Elena Gross, the Director of Exhibitions and Curatorial Affairs at Museum of the African Diaspora in San Francisco. Elena is also an independent writer and culture critic living in Oakland, California. She received an MA in Visual and Critical Studies from the California College of the Arts in 2016 and her BA in Art History and Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies from St. Mary's College of Maryland in 2012. Helena specializes in representations of identity in fine art, photography, and popular media. We are also joined by Larry Osei-Mensah, who uses contemporary art as a vehicle to redefine how we see ourselves and the world around us. The Ghanaian American curator and cultural critic has organized exhibitions and programs at commercial and nonprofit spaces around the globe, from New York City to Rome. Osei-Mensah is also the co-founder of Art Noir, a global collective of culturalists who design multimodal experiences aimed to engage this generation's dynamic and diverse creative class. We're also joined by artist Anan Afote. Anan was born and raised in Accra, Ghana. After graduating from Granata College of Art and Design, winning Best Student of Still Life, Best Imagination and Composition, and Best Abstract Drawing Awards, Anan joined the Revolution Art Organization and displayed his work in several group and solo shows in Accra. In 2013, Anan helped found the African Young Artists Organization, AYAO, an organization dedicated to supporting African youth in the arts through programs and exhibitions. Anan lived in Wisconsin from 2014 to 2019 and currently lives in Oxford, UK. Over to you, Elena.
Thank you, Dimitri, and thank you, Larry and Anan, for being here for this virtual presentation of our annual Engage Symposium. It's really exciting to be able to be in conversation with both of you, kind of thinking about this new, the Ghanaian art market and the Ghanaian experience, artistic experience, which is something that we've really through the Amoako Boafo exhibition, we've really been thinking about how to best engage with artists from the continent and bring them more into MoAD space virtually as well as in person. So just wanted to thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's lovely to see both of you. So to kick things off, I just want to both of your experiences, Anan as a Ghanaian painter and Larry as a Ghanaian American curator. How have you seen sort of the artistic culture and community, specifically in Accra, shift in recent years? What for you, Anan, how have you seen things kind of progress since your time at Granata? I'd just be curious to know.
Your line was breaking, so I didn't hear the last part. What you said?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Elena was asking how have things changed since you were at Granata.
Oh, since I was in Granata. So I completed Granata in 2007. And after completing, it was a little bit difficult, and I struggled a lot as an artist, because in Ghana, our community don't really support artists. Even sometimes we have parents that they don't want their kids to go into art because they know art doesn't fetch much money, for when they grow up. So after Granata, I was struggling a lot financially, But then, I did not give up. I keep, painting and painting. Sometimes, I sell, and sometimes too I don't. But then, as I keep on painting, I realize, it's something that I love, and I don't have to be thinking about it fetching me money because, I love it. So I did not give up. And after I left Ghana in 2014, I was in the US, and that is when I realized, how people treat art in Ghana is a little bit different from how people treat art in US, because they treat it as a job, So it shifted a little bit for me, because I feel like I have a career now, and I want to keep painting and never to stop painting.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, you're seeing the attitudes and the mindsets shift within families, within communities. You're seeing more artists that are able to be sustainable and not necessarily have to go abroad to get recognition. You're seeing more women. So I recently came back from Ghana the beginning of January. And for me, it was exciting to see more women part of the ecosystem. You're seeing more collectives. And I think that's probably for me the one thing that I noticed with Ghanaian artists from the continent, that there is this kind of collective action. And it's not just about the success of one person. I think, we talk about, the alums of Granata, but, there are other schools like, Kwame Nkrumah University. I think Takrade has a program. Winneba has a program. But all of these artists are staying in touch with each other. They've identified different ways to support each other. So when they get opportunities for studio visits, for example, I was able to visit so many artists because one artist would say, "Oh, have you visited this artist down the road or around the corner?" And so I think there's a generosity and understanding that right now that this is a time of shift and a time of opportunity, and that, the vocation of being an artist is already challenging. And so any opportunity we can create where more people can benefit, whatever that may look like, you're seeing people take advantage of it. So for me, it's super exciting. And it's kind of awe-inspiring to literally know you're witnessing a shift happen before your eyes, and just kind of processing, what can I do as a curator to continue to add value, to be engaged with the artists, be in conversation with the artists, help create opportunities for them, whether that's in exhibitions or, writing essays or recommending them for projects. So, right now it's just an exciting time, and I'm just trying to continue to do my part to be of service. I think we lost Elena.
Yeah, it kicked me out for a second. All right,
Yeah,
I'm back.
Technology.
Yeah. You would think after 2 years of this, it'd be a lot easier. But yeah, I'm curious, also thinking about Anand's work and, being, this kind of figurative style, and the fact that we're seeing so many painters who are working within figurative representation emerging out of West Africa, and specifically, obviously, Ghana right now. I'm wondering, I guess, what do you think is kind of the impetus for this return almost of sorts to figuration? I think for a while there was a shift, at least in American spaces, this kind of drive back.
Are you there?
Yeah, I think there's some tech issue, but I think that the question generally is why do you think there's been such a explosion?
Yeah, I mean,
coming from Ghana.
Coming from Ghana and globally even, because we're seeing it, with American-based artists, we're seeing it with UK-based artists. So I'm just curious if, what do you think is kind of driving this interest in figuration?
Yeah, with me, I think figurative and portraiture has been there for many years, but I feel like it hasn't been seen or recognized, and I feel like this is the time that people are getting to know much about it. When you look at back in the days, when you look at someone like Amoako, he's been painting portrait and figurative for many years, but he wasn't very well known. He's a Ghanaian painter, but he wasn't very well known. And also, when you look at an artist like Carrie James Marshall, he's also been painting figurative and portraiture, but he was, like just recently very, very well known, I should say. And I feel like in Ghana, everyone has their own concept or reasons of going back into portraiture. I used to paint more of abstracts and impressionism before shifting to portraiture, because I have a reason why I shift to portraiture, and that has to do with my little boy. Living in the US and becoming a father, it draws my attention on how much more how much this means to me as an artist, and also someone who find it very difficult speaking in public. So I prefer pouring my heart on the canvas, and to show how much appreciation I have on people with dark skin or complexion. So I feel like figurative is something that has been there. It's not a trend. It's something that has been there, for many, many years. And, yeah. Larry, if you have anything else to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the reality is when you think about Black figuration in terms of makers, there's only so many reference points, right? When you're studying painting in school or in a book, you still, unfortunately, when you're looking at Renaissance painting, when you're looking at the masters, they're white painters, and so I think we are still rectifying a very significant gap in art history. And so, I think that's one component to it. I think the other component is, given particularly what's happened in the last 2-3 years, with COVID, with George Floyd, with Black Lives Matter, there's just a demand from artists as creatives, because I think they guide us in helping us understand just kind of the temperature of what's happening in the world, giving us perspective, and from collectors, from art lovers to see themselves. For me, I want to live with work that's reflective of my identity, my personality, how I see the world. And so I think there's been more of a demand of that. And then I also think that, it's important. And my hope is that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, Anand will be a reference point for a young Ghanaian artist or a young artist from the Bronx or from Los Angeles, and being really enmeshed in the canon. And so I think right now, a lot of it is trying to rectify a lot of omissions in terms of their artistic canon. And for me, it'll be the day where, like, you have books like Young, Gifted, and Black, but that showcase Bernard Lumpkin's collection. And this will be a reference point that artists from all backgrounds, not even just from the African diaspora, but just from all cultural backgrounds, they'll look at this as also mastery level art. So I think it's been a progression. And as Anand mentioned, I mean, you have artists like Barkley Hendricks, who's been doing this for a long time. And I think also, like, figuration is just something that people are naturally able to connect to, But I think in this explosive interest in figuration, it's going to expand the pie for everybody, because they're going to have people who work in abstraction, people who work in sculpture, people who work in video, who will have a jumping off point to respond to. And so for me, that's what's super exciting about this moment. Like, I look at an artist like Ibrahim Mahama. I got to spend some time with him in Tamale at his Red Clay space and see what he's doing in terms of, organizing exhibitions, and really creating a space for his community to enjoy art. So, for me, as Anna said, it's not a trend. I think if you're invested in being an advocate and supporter of artists from the diaspora, this is an inflection point. I would say that. But for me, an inflection point that's going to create a multitude of opportunities for so many more artists. I think Elaine is frozen.
Yeah.
And I guess, are you back, Elena?
Yeah, I think she's back.
Okay. Well, while we get the text sorted, Anand, what drew you to painting in the first place?
So I think I started painting since I was 13, but drawing since I was 10, I think. It started with my dad. My dad is also an artist, but he did not pursue art. He did a mechanic instead. But I see him all the time sketching, and sometimes I sketch with him together. So that is how I started. It all started, and with painting, it started after my junior high. I've always known I wanted to be an artist. So it started from junior high. After I completed junior high in 2003, I attended Granata College of Art and Design after that. And during that time, I realized this is what I wanted to do. But my parents, after I completed junior high, my parents asked me to do auto mechanic because my older brother is into auto mechanic and he makes tons of money from it. So my parents asked me to join him and work with him because he makes lot of money. But then I have no choice because I live with my my parents. And in Ghana, if you live under the roof of your parents, sometimes when they say something, you have to listen. So I work with my brother for a little bit, like 6 or 7 months. And then after I make some money from it, I decided to go to Granata, use the money that I make, go to Granata, and then pursue my my passion for art.
And you alluded to it earlier, like, what do you think it'll take to change the mindsets of families to understand that being an artist is just as important as being a mechanic? Because, like, I remember I was talking to Afia Prempe, who had a show this fall at Gallery 1957, and she talked about the challenges of having support from her family, and they didn't really get it until they saw the exhibition and they saw the impact that it was having. And so what do you think is necessary to continue to shift these attitudes so that if children are interested in being artists, that's something that they can legitimately pursue with support, as opposed to feeling like it's going against their parents' wishes or having to move abroad because they're not getting support on the ground?
Yeah, that is how I think it has always felt. You know, I think one thing that Ghanaians or our leaders can do to help this younger generation with artistic ability is to maybe add that to their syllabus, like putting some of our older artists, elderly artists in their books, teaching them about their practice and their process, even including Amoako, who has opened many doors for the younger generations, and we are, you know, looking up to him. You know, he's like he paved the way for all the artists. So I feel like this is something that the government has to come in, because we don't get the support from the government or our leaders because they think art doesn't fetch anything or doesn't play a vital role in our community. So I feel like if they are able to put it in their syllabus, like teach from the early age, like maybe primary, you know, include all the very well-known artists or people that, you know, partaking in the arts industry, they should, you know, put them in it. So something like that. And then the entertainment aspect also, we don't see anything about art. It's all about music and other stuff like that. Like, Amoako has been there. He has made a lot of impacts on the young generation, but you don't see Amoako on social media. You don't see, people talking about him on the social media unless the people that are in the art community that you get to know, they are talking about Amoako and stuff like that. So, this is the time that I feel like the government has to, come in, leaders has to help to, create something for our younger generations.
That's an all of this is a really interesting point in terms of thinking about, we're talking around this idea of canon as well, like this idea of the canon, which is a really complicated and loaded kind of thing. But I think in a lot of Western contexts, there's this large gap of understanding the work that has come out, that has been being created and being produced, and has come out of the continent for many years. I think there's a gap of knowledge that exists, and we can name all of these American or European masters, so to speak, as you were speaking to, Larry. But there's a very short list of African artists that people can name. And so I was just curious, between both of you and your experience and your expertise, who are some of the artists, some of the painters, some of the artists who came before you, perhaps, that really inspired or really inflect the work that you're doing, that should be more known on a global scale? Like, what are, or certain movements, even certain within a Western context that they should?
Yeah.
Larry, is that a question to me?
Yeah. So, because you had named one artist before, I guess who are some other Ghanaian artists that you looked up to that people should know? I know Dr. Glover at the Artist Alliance was one that I had no clue who he
really
was.
See,
No.
This is one of the things I'm talking about. We have so many amazing, very well-known Ghanaian artists, but only in Ghana.
Yeah.
That is the thing. Only in Ghana. Like, they are very well-known, and all of us, all the younger generations, we have all looked up to them. I can mention few names.
Who are some other ones?
Someone like Professor Ablado Glover, he's one of them I've looked up to. And Wiz Kudowo, who's also an amazing abstract painter. And Larry Otu, who is also an amazing abstract painter. And Kofi Indro, who is also very well known. He does an amazing landscape paintings. And Amonkote, who I mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
And Amatefio, he's also an amazing landscape painter, very well known. And Kowalski, who's also an amazing abstract painter. So I can just keep on mentioning, because it's like they are known only in Ghana but not worldwide. So talking about people who have inspired us, they are part of our inspiration. They are part of the people who we look up to when growing up. And Benjamin Agbay, who I speak to a lot, he's also very great influence on the younger generations. I remember coming up, we talk a lot, and he tells me not to give up, because things are very difficult, but he tells you not to give up. He keep pushing you to keep painting, So yeah, our elderly artists, they have really inspired us and helped us a lot in many ways.
And I think you mentioned Benjamin. I'd be curious, what are the conversations that you're having now, particularly because now you've got some momentum behind your practice? Is there any insights that they're providing for you? Because I think obviously calling the names out on a program like this and letting people know these artists exist and that they didn't just start, 4 or 5 years ago, but there actually is a whole generation of painters who've been working. And I think, what is some advice that he's been giving to you? And then what do you think we need to do to make sure that these artists become household names just as much as your generation?
So mostly the conversations that we have are like, figurative and portraiture paintings that, we've been doing now. So before, he's a type of artist that is all around. He does abstract, he does landscape, he does portraiture. He's also an old student from Granata College of Art and Design, actually. So he is like our older generation. So the conversations that we sometimes have is, how we all started, from Granata to how he is now. We have that kind of, conversations, and then also conversations between the elderly people and then the younger generations. Like when we talk about people that have been there and have been inspiring us for many years, he's one of them. And then we also talk about galleries. That was before very difficult to even go into galleries as an artist. I remember when I was after Granada, I tried to go into a couple of galleries, but they rejected me because I was young, and they usually like to work with the elderly members. So we sometimes talk about, we look back and then we go like, oh, wow. I remember back in the days, they don't allow younger artists to participate in any exhibitions because, they think you are young and you don't have the experience that the elderly artist has, so they don't want to include you in any exhibitions. So that has an effect on most of the younger generations. So due to that, we ended up even creating an organization called Ayao. That is in 2013, we created an organization called Ayao, which is African Youth Art Organization. So that inspires the younger ones. So all the younger ones, we came together to talk about these issues because, we don't get the support from galleries because they don't want to include the younger ones in exhibitions or even to go into their galleries. So we created this platform for the youth, and we did a couple of exhibitions before I moved to the US in 2014.
And quickly speaking about that move, how much of moving to the US and now you're in the UK has informed not only your practice but your identity as an artist? Earlier you spoke about, being a father kind of has had an influence, but how much is this immersing yourself in these foreign spaces and trying to find normalcy, trying to find, peace, trying to cultivate a family, inform your practice? Because I know when we talked before, you had mentioned your love of salsa. So I would love for you to talk about that as well, and how, like, because
Salsa
that was not
dancing or
something.
salsa the
Yeah,
food?
salsa dancing.
Salsa dancing.
Okay.
Salsa dancing.
It could have gone either way. So
Yeah, no, like that was the same question I asked.
Yeah.
How much of that is also kind of inform the practice?
So when I moved to the US, I actually I did not stop painting. So when I moved to the US, I keep on with my practice. But like living in Ghana, I'm all surrounded by women and family members, peeling oranges and kids playing in the dust and all of that stuff. But then when I moved to the US, I don't see such things anymore, which inspires me to, like in my paintings. So then I started talking to families outside to send me pictures, because usually I go out to take pictures myself, and I paint them. So since I don't see those things around me anymore, I started talking to them to take pictures for me. So when they send me pictures, because I was living in the US, I started asking myself, how do I indicate things around me here as well? So I started painting houses in Ghana. Ghana is very colorful. I started painting buildings in Ghana, very colorful buildings, and then I will put a snow on it, even though it doesn't snow in Ghana. So that depicts both countries. Like Ghana is very hot, and then there's snow on top of it. So I started doing things like that. And then after when I started this new body of work, This started in 2018. I started with a sketch. When my wife told me about the news of her pregnancy, I was like, okay, so as an artist, how do I create a voice for me as a father and also for my little unborn baby? So I started experimenting portrait painting. I started painting, sketching on how to create portraits. I started experimenting it, and then it goes to a time that I was like, okay, so how do I portray this as an artist to create a voice? I'm a kind of person who is very shy to talk in public, so this is the only way I can create, this. So I started sketching a lot to create this. So yeah.
What about the salsa dancing?
You are very interested. So when I moved there, I became friends with a couple of people who are in the salsa community. I used to dance too in Ghana. So I became friends with people who supported me a lot. I didn't know anything about racism until I moved to Ghana. I moved to the US actually. So I became friends with a couple of people, and during that time, they introduced me to the salsa community. So I joined a team called Salsa Brosa Dance Company, who we travel a lot, do workshop, dance outside, compete, and all of that. So that also become like a second hobby for me. And also I design and sew as well, which I don't usually talk about. I design what I'm wearing actually, and
I need
so I
one.
became friends. Yeah, I became friends. I made some friends in the US and the salsa community. So yeah.
And
So once in a while, I still dance once in a while.
so how does those other creative expressions come out in the painting, if they do at all, in terms of how
Yeah,
you
it did.
dress the
It
figure?
did. It did. In 2015 or 2016, I remember I did a show which has some of the salsa dancing in the paintings. It has a couple of them, and I included like a painting with different kind of dance, ballet, salsa, tango. It's all putting together. And then also there is a ballet school in Milwaukee, which commissioned me to do a painting of their new program that they were going to have. It's called Dorian Transformation of Dorian Gray, which I did a piece on that too. So it's also about dancing.
When was that done?
It was done in Milwaukee.
Okay. What
Yeah.
year?
I think this was in 2018.
Okay.
2018. Yeah.
And you mentioned something earlier. You had mentioned that you didn't, and I think this is an interesting kind of point in terms of difference of experience, that you didn't experience racism until you came to the United States. How has being in a place that is not predominantly Black or African or Ghanaian also kind of shaped how you view the potential impact of your work?
So living in Ghana before, people don't stare at me because of how I look, and I never experienced anything like that, But when I went to the US, sometimes people stare at me, they look at me in certain ways. And even sometimes if I go out to dance, people ask me certain questions that, I never got asked in Ghana, like why your eyes are red. Do you smoke? Do you do high? Like do you drink a lot? And it's something that I never experienced, in Ghana. So sometimes when I look back, that has an effect on most of my paintings, because I felt like, things that I used to experience in Ghana is different from how I things that I experienced in the US. So I started portraying, some of my portraits, some of them have a red eye, and some also have a little bit light eye. Because of that is how I used to see myself in Ghana. I never know my eyes are sometimes red until it was pointed out to me, you know, in the US.
Mm. And then what's the experience been in the UK? You know, having access to, I think, was it the National Museum or the National Gallery? Now Kehinde Wiley's work is on view there in London. You know, Yinka Shonabari is there. Lynette Yadam Bwacha is there.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had opportunity to have access to some of these artists?
Not yet, because we moved here not too long ago before COVID. So I didn't get a chance to do a lot here, but you know, my experience here has been really amazing so far. Yeah.
And so do you find yourself now looking at how do you pull from your experience in Ghana, your experience in the States, and now in the UK to kind of create this new, you know, combination?
Yeah, I have that. I have that in mind. So when you look behind me, you know, you can see a portrait of me with a unpainted arm.
Mm-hmm.
So that portrayed something. That portrayed all the places that I've lived. You know, Ghana, US, and then UK. So that leave a space for audience to feel in. So that has an impact on my paintings as well.
Cool. Alana, do you have a question?
Yeah, so something that I think, you know, that I think about a lot in terms of looking at your work, in terms of looking at Amaako's work, is obviously this kind of both the complexity of the skin in the way that you paint the portraits. There's, you know, kind of teasing out this richness and this textural, this like really beautiful like textural effect to the skin. And I'm curious, and obviously the darker skin tone. And so I'm curious around what conversations around race and complexion are like in a country with a majority black population. How are conversations around race being affecting the work that you're doing, as well as how is it kind of emerging in public discourse or cultural conversations around it?
Okay, like I mentioned earlier on, growing up in Ghana, I did not know about racism until I moved to the US. Okay, so when I look back, you know, like my paintings has that effect on me. So like, you know, the dark complexions that are in my painting depict how we look, and then, you know, telling a story to my little boy, you know, we should love who we are. Like in Ghana, sometimes if some people have a darker skin, they go like, oh, you are too dark, you know. So some people try to even like bleach themselves to have this lighter skin, you know. So my point is really, you know, tells us, you know, we are beautiful how we are, you know. If you are dark, you should, you know, love who you are. If you have a lighter skin, you should love who you are. You know, you don't have to change your skin color to, you know, a lighter skin to be beautiful, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think one thing that, I mean, it hasn't come up much in terms of like dialogue on my end, but you do see it. Anand alludes to it. Is probably more issues of colorism than they are of racism in Ghana. I mean, you can see it sometimes. I think you probably see it more in a mediated experience in terms of like advertisements, commercials. Um, for me personally, I find it kind of odd when I see somebody who's bleached their skin. You know, because they say you can tell when you look at somebody's hands.
Yeah.
So if they're
Which is
like super fair, their hands are like dark.
Yeah, especially this back.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because both of you, the hands so often come up, the incomplete hands so often come up in your work too. That's funny that's, I don't know. That's an interesting connection.
But do you feel sometimes you're making a commentary on that colorism, Anand? Because I think sometimes you have, I know sometimes the parts of the body are incomplete for the viewer to complete, but sometimes I see these white hands and I just think about people who are attempting to bleach themselves and attempt to fit in, to fit a kind of like white Western standard, you know. So do you find subconsciously that's a comment on that?
So the question I got asked a lot is, why do you leave your hands white? That is what they say. Why do you leave your hands white? But it's actually unpainted. That is how I call it. And sometimes it's not only the hand. I feel like my work always have to leave something unpainted. It's not always the hand. Sometimes I will leave something at the background, like a lamp. I don't paint it. I will just leave it blank, so the audience can fill up that space. The audience can also be part of the paintings. It's not always the hand, but usually I leave the hand unpainted, and then sometimes leave certain things unpainted at the background.
Okay. Any other question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just curious, even I guess to hear from you specifically, Larry. I guess just thinking about how, as a curator who's working both in the States and globally, kind of back and forth, how are you seeing? And obviously, you kind of mentioned earlier the last couple of years with George Floyd, with Black Lives Matter, and how are you seeing, I guess, African American artists kind of confronting race within their work, and how are you seeing artists working in these other spaces globally confronting race in their work? And do you think there's a relationship? Do you think the artists are having a transnational dialogue around? If there is a transnational dialogue happening between artists in the States and artists abroad, specifically thinking about this now global, I shouldn't say now global interest, but this explosion of global conversation around race, and not even specifically racism, but race and beauty, race and politics, race. And I'm just curious if you're seeing much.
I think you're seeing a more of a plurality of perspectives, right? So you have some people who are addressing race head on, but then I think you have people who are addressing race in a more subversive way by kind of focusing on the Black beauty, focusing on the Black joy, focusing on the subjectivity. I think with the Amoako show, for example, at MoAD, we talk about, what does the world look like devoid of the white gaze, right? Like I have Tina Kemp's book right now that I've started reading, talking about the Black gaze and what happens when we kind of focus on how we see the world. And so I think you're seeing more of a focus towards that, and not really being worried about what I guess the white art world has to think, and really about what do we have to think about each other. What are other dynamic ways to kind of express how we exist? Like, one thing that I've noticed with a lot of artists is like they talk about hair, for example, and hair being like a really integral component in terms of how they sculpt it in a painting. Material, I'm seeing an expansive in material use. Some of that is out of necessity, but I think others is to, Anand just mentioned that the jacket that he's wearing, he made it, and so I think you're seeing a lot more individuals looking for validation through the art, and the artists looking for vehicles to validate themselves, not only as artists, but as humans. And so I think, there definitely is more of a transnational conversation. I think it's been exciting to see, like with Gallery 1957, you have an artist like Patrick Alston who did the residency. So seeing more artists coming back to the continent, whether it be doing residencies, exploring, and really trying to understand those information gaps that Anna was pointing out. I mean, he listed 10 artists earlier, and I only know 2. So for me now, it's my responsibility to make sure that I understand who are the torchbearers, the forefathers when it comes to contemporary art in Ghana. But I think what's also interesting, like with Soul of Black Folks and that exhibition, and what Du Bois was assessing through the book and thinking about what Amoako has been able to accomplish. You know, when I was in Ghana, I went to the Du Bois Center, and just kind of like looking and thinking about this work's potential to function as this catalyst for a more contemporary Pan-African discourse. Because it's interesting to see, Anna talks about, like, you know, when it comes to the art world globally, you know, most people know who he is, or they've at least seen the work, you know, and that is an effect that you only really can get through art. You know, I think visual art, music may give it to you, cinema may give it to you. And so really seeing visual art as this kind of soft power tool for diplomacy, tool for cultural understanding, tool for bridging this divide. And I think a lot more people are curious. Like, I mean, just coming back from Ghana, we had a great time during the holidays. And a lot more people are like, what's happening in Ghana? Why is it so amazing? And I'm like, this is the world, you know, when it's just Black folks for the most part, you know, and you can have, I mean, and granted, things are not perfect, you know, but I think to be in a space where you feel affirmed, right, and you're not having to perform, you know, so I think that's the other thing, Elena, to point out. Less artists are interested in performing. And it's just like, this is what I do. This is my expression. You're either with it or you're not. And if you're not, there are plenty more people who are interested in what I have to say as an artist, whether that be a writer, whether that be a painter. And so I think that's really been beautiful to see people go to Ghana or Dakar or South Africa or Kenya and find these spaces of affirmation and then hold that close and then bring that back to where they are. And then try to utilize whatever resources or skills that they have to begin to figure out ways to remain in dialogue with these spaces. So I think the key point is that people are putting themselves in spaces where they feel affirmed, they feel loved, they feel seen. And I think that goes back to your question about why there is so much interest in portraiture. Portraiture has the power for, I mean, you're sitting in front of a photograph, like, you know, the image of something or someone that looks like you, and to feel seen, to feel embraced, particularly when you live in a place like the United States where, like, there are tons of benefits and tons of downsides, you know, and you're constantly negotiating that. And so to be in your home, you know, and not standing in front of one of his own works, your sanctuary, to be able to look at things that make you feel affirmed, make you deal with the challenges of race, class, colorism. You know, it gives you almost this armor, you know, to go out. It's like clothes do that, to go out and deal with, like, the challenges of the day to day.
Yeah, I think there's something that feels really familial about kind of this network of artists who are working right now. Like, it's beyond just being colleagues. It feels close knit in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like there's a level of care about for one another, and I think that's something that you're seeing seep out into, you know, just all of these larger conversations. Like, how do we care for one another, not only as art practitioners, but as people? And the art helps do that. Like, the art helps feed that sense of community. I wonder if, you know, I think, you know, it's hard to, you know, the US is so spread out in certain ways and has its own politics, but I wonder if you feel that sense of togetherness more in spaces like Accra than perhaps you do in certain spaces, like, or do you think that that's changing as well? Do you think that perhaps this sense of like family is something that's translating in all of these other enclaves as well?
Well, I think in terms of Accra, you definitely feel it foundationally. And I think my attitude is like, how do you bottle that energy and bring it back with you, you know. And I think tools like social media, like Instagram, WhatsApp, allow for that. Like Anana and I often are like DMing each other. And we didn't really we didn't meet until maybe October, November, or something like that in person.
Yeah.
But there's a dialogue that you feel like you know this person. You feel this person has your best interest in mind. But I think it goes back to this point I made earlier about collective action, where like if you have a collective group, whether it's in Accra or whether it's in San Francisco, you can find those spaces, those safe spaces, those spaces of peace and affirmation, you know. But I think at the end of the day, it starts with the individual and it starts with the self, you know, and really doing the work to kind of really understand who you are as an individual, and how do you want to add value to our society, and then identifying other like-minded people who are in that same headspace. But yeah, so I think there's a polarity to it, you know, because not everybody's going to have the opportunity to go to the continent, right? But I think in learning, and I think about, you know, bell hooks of salvation, like learning the importance of self-love and self-determination and activating that within your community. I mean, I get that very much when I go to the Bay, even though the demographics have changed, you know, you still feel that energy. It might not be thousands of people, it might be hundreds or 20 people, but like you feel that kind of essence of that history of activism, the history of the Panthers, like in the ether there. And so I think, you know, it's something that can happen on the grassroots level because we've been doing this for generations. And I think it's something that can happen on a broader scale. But I think, you know, the key is kind of knowing who you are, and what it is that you want to contribute to our society to make our world a better place, to make things easier for each other. Yeah, but I'm conflicted with that question because I definitely had a hard time when I came back from Ghana. You know, I was there nearly a month, you know, and it's like even with people that you don't know super well, you knew there was a cultural alignment. And so I didn't have to explain a lot of things. You know, you just kind of knew. Like my tree is terrible, you know, but I never felt like an outcast. You know, it just kind of was what it was. But I think the other thing that I'm beginning to recognize even more is that culturally we're just way more complex. You know, so to go to the north of Ghana, in Tamale, which is like predominantly Muslim, they speak another language, another dialect. To go to Winneba, which is only maybe an hour and a half west of Accra, they speak Tree, but then they speak something else. You know, really kind of just helps me realize that, you know, it's our humanity that unites us, you know, and the identity, there is some alignment in terms of being folks from the African diaspora. But I think we all are searching for ways to also express ourselves as individuals.
That's very well said. So we're coming on the last couple minutes here. I just want to say once again, thank you both to Anand. Thank you, Larry, for being in conversation. I think it was really special hearing the two of you tease out, you know, this relationship between one another, not only again as artist curator, but also as a family of sorts, as a part of this larger diasporic world and larger global Black community, which is really something special that we get to do here at MoAD. And so it's exciting to be able to share with larger and larger networks. So thank you for being in conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you both. This was great.